Hello again, maybe. Welcome to BCBA Talks, and today we're going to talk about communication. It is like my biggest passion when it comes to ABA is teaching communication or teaching functional communication to be specific because it's so important. We see so many benefits from kids learning how to communicate, and not just kids, adults. I do tend to say the word kids a lot, but just know we can replace that with person or people or whatever, because as we know, ABA is not just for kids. But I've mostly worked with kids. I've worked with adults and teens also, but I've mostly worked with kids, and so I tend to just spit that word out before even thinking about it. So ABA is incredibly effective when teaching, I'm not going to say speech, but teaching communication. So we're not worried about, if your child has had speech, like speech therapy, then you know a lot of the way that they do stuff is based on the form of language. So we're talking about the different sounds that we're producing and what part of the mouth produces what, and how do I stimulate that sound production, and how do I make you be able to enunciate and pronounce this word correctly, and so on and so forth. In ABA, it's a little bit different in that we look at language based on its function. So not its form. We're not looking at what the language looks like. We're looking at what is that word that you're saying or trying to say. What is it trying to convey? What is its purpose? How is saying that word? What stimulus made it happen in the first place? And what's the consequence that you're looking to get from saying that word? So in another video, I'm going to talk specifically about verbal behavior, which is what it's called, and how we teach it, and kind of the different facets of verbal behavior. But for right now, I want to talk about some really common mistakes that I see people make when teaching communication. Originally, I sat down to come up with 10 mistakes, and I came up with like 30. So there are a lot out there. And this is, I'm not just talking about parents or people who are not necessarily in ABA but are experts in other disciplines. I'm talking specifically about people in ABA. I've seen them make these mistakes over and over again, and some of them are just so crazy to me and so wild that they still keep happening. So I wanted to make a video. I'm not going to do all 30 because I would seem too much like a critical smartass. I'm going to just do 10. So I picked kind of the 10 that I think are the most critical ones, or kind of the easiest to remedy, and then we'll hit on the other ones some other time. Okay, let's get into it. So mistake number 1 that I notice a lot is not starting in communication right away. So communication is a big thing in that once it starts to happen, once we start seeing increases in communication, we see a decrease in a lot of the other challenging or problem behaviors. So we know that a lot of these behaviors, most behaviors that we see kids and adults engage in with autism or otherwise, have some sort of communicative purpose. So barring those behaviors that you just do because they feel good to yourself and you would do them in a room by yourself, we engage in behaviors in order to communicate something to somebody else. Something like, hey, I want that, or hey, I really don't want that, or hey, look at me. We see that pattern happen with a lot of different behaviors. Particularly, I'm going to speak from the lens of a clinician working with kids with autism, but also with other disabilities or other forms of special needs or anything like that. So we're not working on getting you to sit in circle time or getting you to give me your iPad or getting you to whatever else, unless I'm sure that you have a way to communicate that you don't want to do that, or that you'd rather do something else, or that you have the means to ask for something that you want or need in that particular situation. So communication is number 1 because we really see it have such a huge effect on all of the other domains. So from social skills to self-care to just how well I get along with my family and my parents and my friends. Communication is such an integral part of that. So when I see clinicians start with things like tolerating sitting down at the table for 5 minutes, it's like, it doesn't make any sense, right? Because if you think about it, like I said before, it serves a primarily communicative function. So if me as an adult with functional communication, if you give me a piece of food that I don't want, I can say, actually, I'm not hungry. Or I can say, I'm not really that into bones actually in my meat, so I'd prefer to not eat this. If I don't have a way of communicating no thank you, I might just chuck the food on the floor, right? I might chuck the whole plate on the floor. If you're making me sit down for some activity that I really don't want to do, like for a kid it might be circle time, for me it might be like CrossFit, okay? If you're making me go to CrossFit, I might be like, oof, yeesh, I'm really not into CrossFit right now. Maybe later, once I get, let me get my stamina up a little bit, maybe I'll go to CrossFit later. But a kid who's just sitting down in circle time, and mind you, this might be their first time sitting in a social setting or even having to sit for any period of time and watch people talk about letters and numbers that you might have no interest in, or sing songs that you might not be able to imitate, you might not be into it at all. All you're thinking about is, God, I really want to watch those same 10 seconds of that video again and again and again. Then what way do you have of telling me that, other than maybe throwing a fit or maybe pinching your peer, because those things are going to get you removed out of the setting, right? So we need to use logic a little bit and look at really the function of that behavior that is happening. And even if no behavior, even with a child with no challenging behaviors or no problem behaviors, think about the quality of life that just being able to say, hey, can I have a cookie? I'm hungry. Those things, or I'm cold, or I got to go to the bathroom, or I'm bored, or anything like that. Think of the quality of life. Think of the impact it would have on your quality of life if you weren't able to say those things. So for that reason, it needs to be literally number one that we do is communication. Now, obviously, if we have communication goals in, we can work on other things at the same time, but working on other things without putting in communication is a huge red flag. If you're working with a clinician who does this, I would have at the very least a serious discussion with them about why that is. Okay, the number 2 mistake that I see people make, even if they are working on communication goals, let's say they're working on speech goals, so they're trying to get the client to produce some type of vocal approximation for milk or cookie or iPad or whatever it is that they really want. They sometimes don't look past vocal communication, aka speaking with your voice. So in ABA, there's a big distinction actually between being verbal and between being vocal, because I can verbally communicate this, me going like this, that's verbal communication. That's me saying, hey, come here, right? Or I can say, hey, can you please come here? Or whatever other combination I can do of non-vocal verbal or vocal verbal or whatever, okay? With some kids and adults, we see that they're not able to speak. They're not able to speak vocally, or they're not able to learn to speak vocally within a certain period of time that would allow them to start getting their needs met. Because like we said, as soon as we start getting that communication going, we see other things that might be more negative or that might be having a negative impact on the quality of life of the child. We see those things start to go down. We see improvements across the board. So if I'm trying to teach you to say a certain word or to ask for a certain thing with your voice, and you have not started doing that within a month or maximum 2 months, I'm going to start looking at other options. So a lot of the time, I understand that clinicians tend to not go there because of resistance they encounter from the parents. Parents think this means we're giving up on vocals. And we all know, let's be honest, vocals are the easiest way to get your point across. If you're a person who can use vocal communication proficiently, you are more likely to have a wider audience, which means that more people are going to be able to know what you want, or more people are going to be able to readily accept and react upon your communication attempts than, say, if you were using picture communication or sign or communicating via an iPad. We know that. So we never stop trying to encourage vocals. But it also doesn't mean that we're going to be comfortable sitting there spinning our wheels and not making progress in a certain area when we know that adding something like sign could, number one, will increase communication. And sign actually is one of the simplest forms of communication for kids with no vocal language or adults with no vocal language. And number two, we also have a lot of research that shows that actually working on these alternate forms of communication will increase vocalizations. So me working on teaching you how to sign that you want milk or you want a cookie or you want to leave or you want whatever will actually increase your production of language. Obviously not with 100% of clients, but with a majority of clients, it will increase. So there's really no negative side to it. It doesn't mean that we ever stop looking for the vocals. We don't ever stop paying attention or trying to encourage those or teach those. But we also want to make sure, first and foremost, that this person has some type of functional communication, that they're able to get their needs and wants met through other means. Okay, number 3 huge mistake I see when teaching communication is not pairing adequately before you start teaching. So your first goal when meeting a new client should not be how am I going to teach them something? It's how am I going to find out what motivates them? That's your number 1. And you yourself want to become the thing that motivates them. If you're walking up to your client and they start running away and hiding and clutching their iPad like this, wah, wah, bad sign. You got to go back to basics. You got to pair. There are a lot of great tips on pairing on the internet. A personal pet peeve of mine is when people pair by just sitting there and watching the client engage in their own favorite activity. Like if I'm sitting there watching, just allowing you to continuously access your iPad. I'm not interacting with you in any way. I'm not enriching your life in any way. You're just doing your thing and I'm there. That's not pairing. I'll do maybe in the future a video specifically about pairing, but it's all about how do I create joy for them? How do I figure out what motivates them? How do I make them laugh? How about that be your first goal? I know it sounds cheesy, but how do I make them laugh and giggle and approach me? My first goal is for the child, when I walk into the room, the child gets a big smile and they approach me because they know, okay, she's cool. She's gonna make me do some stuff, but she's also gonna enrich my life while doing so. And I know it might sound cheesy and lame, but it is really what we have to do, because if you're fighting against your child's motivation, we already know that for a lot of kids, the internal motivation to learn those hard skills like communication, because if it was easy, they'd be doing it. Okay? If this was something that came naturally and easy to them, they would already be doing it like a lot of neurotypical kids do when they're first starting out. So obviously, number 1, it's already something that's hard. What do we know about things that are hard? They tend to decrease motivation. So I'm already working against motivation. Now, if you add on top of that the motivation to want to get away from me as a stimulus in their environment, then I'm really fighting a losing battle, because I'm having to try to motivate you to talk, which is hard, to somebody who you don't want to be around. So that is literally impossible. Okay, you're going to have to use, and then clinicians say, well, we always have to use the iPad. That's the only thing he'll talk about. Yeah, because that's the only thing in his world that is currently motivating enough for him to want to do that super hard thing with a person he really does not like. So we need to kind of bridge the gap there first and foremost and have a good relationship, a good working relationship with our clients where we foster mutual trust and mutual respect, and just honestly have some reinforcing properties about you. Don't be boring, okay? You have to be enthusiastic about what you're doing. Be fun. Okay, mistake number 4, which is also a big one, is not choosing a target that's motivating enough to actually be able to teach. So like we just said, a lot of kids, the first thing that they're going to learn is something like iPad or something for a favorite snack or something like that, because those are the things where the motivation lies. Now, a good technique, obviously, if you are working with a learner whose main and only interest is the iPad, for example, which we know is very common, we see a lot of kids who use a lot of electronics. you are going to have a hard time getting them to ask for the puzzle if they have zero interest for the puzzle. Okay, so even if it's something like we're doing a puzzle and I'm going to have you say, oh, more, and then I give you another piece, which we're going to talk about more in a second. But then I'm going to give you another piece. If I don't even want to be sitting there, again, I'm sitting somewhere where I don't want to be, I'm talking to somebody I don't want to be talking to, and I'm doing this boring ass activity that I don't want to do. All I want to do is get on my iPad. You bet the only thing I'm going to be thinking about is iPads. I'm going to be saying iPad, 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 iPad. I might man for the iPad 5,500 times in a day and not manned at all for my water. I don't care. I might not care about my puzzle. Might not care to go to the bathroom because guess what? I'm in my pull-up. I'm just going to go. You're going to deal with it. Everything's fine. So figure out a way to make that motivation happen and think of things, do a reinforcement inventory, do a lot of preference assessments regularly. So not just once a month when you have to fill out your paperwork, but regularly every day. Follow your child's motivation. So if you're playing with a puzzle and the child keeps reaching for, that's also something I see sometimes drives me crazy. You're playing with a puzzle and a child is reaching for a ball maze or marble maze or whatever, marble run, whatever those are called. And you to take his hand away and go, no, we're working on the puzzle now. Puzzle. And it's like, you are so much more likely to get the man for marble or whatever the thing is that the child is actually interested in than to sit here and try, even if this is your target. I don't care if this is your target, if you wrote down, a lot of the times we'll have specific ones that we're working on. So it'll say, okay, puzzle, he's got to ask for the puzzle. We'll say, okay, block, he's got to ask for the block. But if he doesn't actually care about doing the puzzle or the block, you have to be flexible with changing those targets up and saying, you know what, we'll put puzzle on hold. We're going to target marble run right now because he's really been into the marble run. Or we got this really cool new toy, Play-Doh or bubbles or whatever. He's really into that right now. Let's change up our targets and let's work on that one first. Maybe we'll go back to puzzle or maybe we won't because honestly, who cares about puzzles? Okay, we overuse them like a lot and let's not even go there right now. But anyway, moving on. Okay, the next one, and I kind of touched on it with the more thing, huge mistake, and it's actually been one that has been widely recognized to be a mistake for a while now, so I don't know why I still keep seeing them, but I still keep seeing them a lot, and that's using terms that are too general. So things like eat, or help, or please, or more, anything like that, it only works, it's wild for a couple of reasons. Let me tell you why. Number one, because it makes things a lot harder on the caregivers or whoever. Because, okay, let's say we're working on a puzzle and I'm giving you piece by piece. Let's say you're really motivated to do it. So you keep saying more, more, more. And I keep giving you these puzzles. We're doing so great. And then we go and we have snack. And I give you little pieces of snack at a time. So you have the opportunity to ask. And you're like, more, more, more. Great. Oh my God, so much language. I'm giving you all this stuff. And then we go and we do something else. Maybe we're coloring and you love to color. And so you keep asking me more, more, more for crayons. All right, awesome. We're doing so great. You're saying so many things. I love it. We're having such great interaction. And then, let's say the next day you come back, you come in and you say more. And I'm like, oh crap. More what? So now I bring out the lunch snacks. No, that's not what you want. Dang it. Okay, I bring out the crayons. Definitely not in the mood to color. Okay, and I bring out the puzzle. No, that's not it. Okay, so what exactly are you trying to ask for? I have no way of knowing. So I gave you this response that I'm going to then immediately extinguish. So that means I'm going to cut it away from its original reinforcer. And so in your mind, you're like, well, that's stupid. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes I don't even know what's going on. So you're confused, the client's confused, everybody's confused. It's a bad situation, okay? So if I'm working on puzzle, I'm specifically going to have you say puzzle or whatever thing that is specific to that activity. So when you come in and you say puzzle, I know, oh, that's cool. We're going straight to the puzzles. If I'm working on a snack, I'm going to have you say the specific name of the snack. And so on and so forth. Later on, when kids get more adept at communicating, when you're not just going to so easily extinguish something by not reinforcing it, right? Because we know that takes a while for it to get a really strong responding. then maybe, yeah, sure, we'll teach some other things. Like you can just say, I'm hungry, right? And then fine, all right, let's go to the kitchen. You can choose what you want. Or sometimes when kids use augmentative communication, that's a great way. If you use like the I'm hungry button is the actual folder that's going to then open the whole array of foods that are available. And then I'm hungry means boom, I immediately go into the choice of different things. Or even if your kid's not using augmentative communication, is if they have just a few signs or verbal mands or vocal mands, if they say I'm hungry, using a sign, then you bring out their full list of food and then you're able to, right? But if you just teach them to say eat, because you've taught them to say that with pizza and with nuggets and with fries and with goldfish and with whatever, then what you have to do is bring out every single thing, see what they're looking for, and that's not an efficient way to do communication. Not to mention, if they're with anybody who's not you and who doesn't know what all you use to eat with, all they know is a child saying eat, they might not even know what to offer. Or if you're out in the community somewhere, you're walking in the mall and your child says eat, are you going to go from restaurant to restaurant offering grocery item to, it's like we have to be more precise with what we're teaching, because it's going to allow our clients to be precise with us, which is going to allow us to better reinforce whatever they're saying. Because the last thing we want to do is teach them something that we're then immediately going to extinguish. And the hilarious / terrible part about it is these things we put them on extinction when they generalize. So think about that. Generalization is one of those things that we want more than anything for our clients, right? We want you to be able to apply these things that I taught you in a wide variety of circumstances and settings, and with a bunch of people, and with a bunch of different materials, and with a bunch of different foods, and blah, 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 blah. So why would I teach you something that I know is immediately going to get extinguished the first time it spontaneously generalizes, like more or eat or please? If you go to your kindergarten teacher tomorrow who has no idea what I've taught you to say please about, and you say please, that's amazing. You're generalizing this skill that I taught you. This is my all of my hopes and dreams as a clinician are coming true. And then your kindergarten teacher can absolutely not do anything about it. She cannot reinforce it because she has no idea what please means, right? So let's stay away from choosing these general terms. Okay, our number 6 mistake is not starting with reinforcers in sight. So for kids, neurotypical kids, when they're first learning language, they're going to start asking for things that are in their environment. And we need to really pay attention to that with whatever our first manding targets are. The item that you're teaching, or the edible that you're teaching, the activity that you're teaching, has to have some sort of physical representation in the environment that the child is able to point to or look at and remember and go, oh yeah, totally. Cookie, yeah, I want that. Or whatever. So if one of your target mans is cookie, if you're in the living room and the cookies are in the kitchen, and you're not specifically working on the man cookie, because if you're sitting there and you're working with it, right, then you're probably going to have them around and you're going to keep giving the pieces. We know how to do basic man trials, I hope. But if the behavior generalizes, now I'm in the living room, I'm no longer working on the cookie, but the child remembers and they still want a cookie. How are they going to communicate that to me? If they have not mastered the man for a cookie, which I'm supposed to do gradually. Right now it's in sight. Now maybe I'm holding it behind my back. Now maybe I take you a little bit farther away. Now maybe it's out of reach. Now blah, 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 right? I have a set way that I'm going about this. But if I just take you away from it and I don't give you any way to be able to reliably man for it, or to be able to show your motivation to me, it doesn't even have to be a manned, right? I know that you haven't mastered the man cookie, so I'm not expecting you to just randomly say cookie when you're motivated by it. But I need to know that you're motivated so that I can give you the prompt that you need to be able to ask it, to be able to, for the man to be reinforced. So I have to have some sort of representation in the environment. Now, that doesn't mean, of course, I'm not going to be able to have every single thing you might be motivated by at any moment. available to you in your immediate environment for you to ask me for or to show motivation toward. But if I'm sitting there and the cookies, maybe I'm just keeping them, I'm just keeping a few, or maybe I'm keeping a list of, with pictures on it that has different things. So maybe if you see it on there, maybe you can point to it. And then I go, oh, cookie, and then you say cookie, and then we go and we get a cookie. So we're getting I'm doing something. I'm putting something in place to where I know that you have motivation for something. Of course, when kids are just starting out with MANS, try to keep those specific things that they want in their environment as much as possible to make sure that those opportunities to show motivation are there. Otherwise, what are you going to get? If I have no other means to show my motivation, I might cry, I might kick, I might throw a tantrum, I might elope out into the kitchen and run away from you and try to show you what I want, right? And those are all behaviors that we then say are problem behaviors, and we try to decrease them. But again, we don't really think about why these things keep happening and why are these behaviors so repetitive and so necessary for the child. Well, it's because I have no other way of asking for that danged cookie that I want so bad. Okay, another huge big one that I see is starting with too high of an expectation. So with a lot of kids, that especially moderately to severely affected children or adults, we see the lack of what we call controlled repetitions or echoic control. So with most kids, I'll be able to say dog, and they'll say dog, or they'll say dog if they don't have great repetition. But in some kids, I'm not able to get any type of repetition, even sounds or words or parts of words or anything like that. So in that case, my number one target is not going to be for cookie. Not even that, okay? I don't care about how approximate what you're saying is to me. All I want to get is some type of back and forth. So I'm just trying to get you to respond to me in something. I'm trying to get you to vocalize in some way. I'm trying to get you the point. If we've been at this for a month, or like I said, maximum 2 months, I might be trying to teach you some augmentative communication or alternative forms of getting your point across while we continue to work on those vocalizations. Because if I'm starting at too high of an expectation, we're on the fast road to frustration town, okay? For everybody involved. Because you're going to be like, what's wrong with my program? I don't know why he's so motivated for it, but he just won't ask for it. He can't ask for it. Let's just cross that out with the won'ts, okay? There's some reason why this is not an effective form of communicating for him. So either it's way too hard, you've started off way too high, or the thing you're doing is not motivating enough, or blah, blah, blah. We got into some of the reasons earlier, but it does require a lot of repetition, a lot of manding opportunities, and yeah, that's it. Don't start at too high of an expectation. And another mistake that is closely related to that is increasing the response effort too soon. So let's say you are working with a child who has finally developed those controlled repetitions, and now you're getting it. You say dog, and he says dog, and you give him the dog toy, and he says puzzle, and you give him the thing. And then what happens? Well, very quickly, as soon as kids start having those some repetitions or some spontaneity, which is like the thing that we really want, where I don't have to, remind you or prompt you or anything. You're just independently going around asking for these things. And then a lot of clinicians, what they want to do is they immediately want to increase the response effort, and they want to say, okay, well, you can say puzzle. Now I want you to say, can I have the puzzle? Or I want the puzzle, or give me the puzzle, or whatever. And that sucks for two reasons. We'll talk about the second one in a minute. But the first one is that you're just making it so much harder for them immediately. So give them some time to build up their repertoire of MANs and tacts and all these other verbal behaviors, and give them some time to really strengthen up that response before you go adding stuff. MANs shouldn't be expanded until we have a lot. So I would say over 20 definitely, and some like Dr. Carbone, who I'm sure if you're a BCBA, you've probably heard of that name, says not until we have 50 mans, so 50 strong mans. I want you really, honestly, to think deeply about how many of your clients have 50 mans that are strong, that are spontaneous, that are going to happen in a variety of circumstances. And also, I think he says like 200 or 300 tacts. So we have to really have a pretty good mastery of language before we start adding any what we call expanding. What does that mean? Length of utterance, right? Expanding their MLUs. So really take your time with those expectations. And speaking of which, one of probably my biggest pet peeves in teaching language is the way that we expand those. So we tend to add something called the Manframe, which is honestly utterly and completely useless, especially if you're a child who's just starting language. And I remember working with kids who would literally have like one spontaneous mand a day. So this kid would have to be so motivated and so into whatever he was doing or just really hungry or wanted a snack. And then he would say cookie. And it would be his one and only spontaneous mand for the day. And then the clinician would go, I. And then he would be expected to say, I want cookie before he would get the cookie. So number one, just thinking about it behaviorally. I just did something that's very hard for me that I don't do often. And what do? Instead of giving me the thing that I want, you correct me, right? Who here loves correction? Nobody, right? So first of all, you're giving probably what is an aversive, maybe, I don't know, maybe. We'd have to look at it behaviorally. But you're giving a potential aversive instead of just giving the thing. And then you're immediately increasing the response effort, which we already talked about is a big no-no for kids who don't have a lot of spontaneous and independent language. And then number 3 is you're adding this Manframe that is completely and utterly useless. From the child's perspective, this Manframe does not do anything for them, okay? Maybe it makes their language more typical, which we already know is not cool. That's not why we're in the business, to make these kids seem more typical. We're in the business to increase their quality of life. So from my point of view as a child, whether I'm saying cookie or whether I'm saying I want cookie, it's identical. Obviously, I want the cookie. That's why I'm saying it and pointing to it. That's why I'm crying about it when you won't give it to me, because I want the cookie. So you know that, I know that, my teacher knows that, Aunt Betsy on the corner over there knows that when I say cookie while I'm looking at the cookie or I'm looking at the bag of cookies you're holding, it means that I want a cookie, okay? The same goes for can I have same goes for manners, the please and the whatever. Completely pointless. It serves the purpose of pleasing whoever is listening to the speaker rather than improving the quality of life of the speaker. So that's something that I would suggest completely getting rid of, okay? If in the future, once your learner, like we said, has 50 strong mans, they've got 200 or 300 tacts that they're engaging in spontaneously, you can see that they're not developing this sort of disordered language that sometimes can happen when you teach Manframes too early, which we know with a lot of kids, especially kids who engage in echolalia, you can get a lot of really disordered language. I want up, I want no, all this stuff that is just that you can tell they're just repeating it. You can tell they don't functionally understand what those words I want mean. It's just a repetition. It's not functional language, it's the imitation of functional language. And we want to avoid that because we're just causing so much confusion. And then again, later when a child does engage in some, let's say they're generalizing the I want statement to something else that might be an inappropriate, disordered form of language. And then again, we're correcting, right? And we're prompting and we're teaching about things that we really shouldn't be happening in the first place. Another thing Dr. Carbone talked about is a lot of times when kids come to his program, he has to actually unteach that. So they'll go through the process of just teaching a child to say puzzle, milk, whatever they want without the frame. So you actually if you're teaching it in this way, where you're teaching it before the man is really steady and firm and strong, and there's a good number of them, you might be doing the child a huge disservice by teaching them this. So it's not all about just expanding the length of an utterance, it's about what are we expanding into. So something that I like to do with my clients is do qualifiers rather than just pointless this man frames and expansion. So I want you to qualify what you want. So if you know how to say juice now, I'm not going to teach you to say I want juice or give me juice or bring me juice or can I have some juice please. I'm going to teach you to say orange juice or grape juice or juice glass or juice cup or juice box or some type of qualifier that gives you more control over what specifically you're getting or how you're getting it or when you're getting it or whatever, right? So this is going to increase your quality of life because now all of a sudden when I say juice, if I say orange juice, I'm getting that specific juice that I want. I'm not getting, maybe you just have apple juice at home and maybe I just don't like apple juice. And so telling me, increasing my utterance to I want juice is not going to help me in that situation at all. But increasing it with some type of qualifier, even yellow juice, big juice, whatever, right? Chocolate cookie, brown cookie, big cookie, 2 cookies. So thinking of ways to expand those utterances in a way that are actually useful and functional and will actually make a difference in our learners' lives, I think is huge. Okay, so number 10 in the last one might sound a little bit kooky and crazy when I say it at first, but just bear with me. I'll explain it why it's important. But number 10 is praising. So praising after a child has amended is actually something that I would discourage. And let me tell you about why. So praise is a great thing. It's a social reinforcer, which we want so badly for our clients to be motivated by social reinforcers. We want to condition praise as a great thing. When somebody says, oh my God, you did a great job, we want the child to feel proud, to feel motivated, to feel accomplished. But praise is still a generalized reinforcer. So that means it's not specific to any particular thing, even though they say, oh, make it specific, praise is specific action. That's all well and good, but praise is still a generalized reinforcer. If we think back to our verbal behavior lessons, mands are elicited by motivation or some type of stimulus in the environment that is something that we want. And it's rewarded by specific reinforcement. So the reinforcement with a man needs to be a specific reinforcer that was the thing that you asked for. So what I see happen a lot that is a mistake is, let's say a therapist is holding the bubbles and the child goes, bubbles, and you go, great job, great asking for bubbles. And then you blow the bubbles, right? So if we think about it behaviorally, we know our reinforcers, we know what DISC stands for, right? Deprivation, immediacy, size, contingency. We know that how quickly, temporally, right? So the time relationship between the thing that happened, the behavior that happened, and the consequence, how quickly that happens determines how strong that bond is between the man and the reinforcer in this case, or the behavior and the consequence in any other case. So if I praise you first and then I give you the bubbles. Number one, my praise is closer associated to your man than the item that you wanted, which shouldn't happen. You're not asking me for praise, you're asking me for the bubbles. So I should deliver the bubbles first. Just try to think about that as you're working with on mans or in any type of man training situation with a client. They say bubbles, you think about it. Okay, you blow the bubbles first. That split second, you blow the bubbles, and then you deliver your social reinforcement. Oh my God, you're such a rock star. I can't believe you're, whatever. But if you do it the other way around, you're risking having that relationship not be as strong. That's number one. And number two, you're giving more time for other types of behaviors to kind of insert themselves in between there that we might be inadvertently reinforcing if we take too long. It's the same thing with when you're working on something and you have your bag of chips down here that the child is working for, or maybe the iPad, or maybe tickles, or whatever it is that the child is motivated by, and then they do the thing, and then you sit there and you take your data, and then you give the item. No, you do the reinforcement first and then you do whatever else it is you have to do. You prepare all of your reinforcers so you have them within reach so that you can immediately, especially if it's a man, you have to immediately be able to deliver that man. Or you have to immediately be able to go and get it. So if I'm sitting in the classroom and the child says water, I don't care what I'm working on. If this child is supposed to be working on asking for water, is working on manding in general, if this is a child with difficulty communicating, I'm dropping my imitation or my receptive ID or whatever funky stuff I'm doing, and I'm hightailing it to wherever this child's water is so that they can get it, so that they understand the importance and the strength of their words, because that's how we get communication, is kids understanding, oh shit, when I say this, stuff happens. Like people jump up and they go get me my cookies when I say cookie. I keep using the stupid analogy with the cookie. It doesn't have to be a cookie. It can be anything. Anything that I'm motivated by, because this is how we really get through to our clients in understanding, okay, the words that I say are important, or the verbal behavior that I engage in is important. It matters. People hear me. People see it. People care. And I'm going to keep doing this because it works so well for me. If you do other, where it's like, oh, sometimes when I say it, she'll get up and sometimes she'll make me do these 10 things first. And of course, that's not to say you're not going to behave like that forever. Once these mans get strong, then we're going to start working on delaying, the access to that. We're going to start, okay, yep, we can have a cookie. Just hold on. Let's finish this first and stuff like that. So you're going to start working on those things eventually. But in the beginning, when your learner is working mostly on communication, because like we know in part 1, that should be the first thing that they work on if it's not at a certain level where they can already get their needs met. This is what we're working on. So, yeah. So focus on giving the item or giving the activity, engaging in the activity, whatever, and then give the praise. Obviously, we don't want the praise to stop. Praise is a great thing, but it just needs to have a time and a place where it is not going to possibly hamper some of the other stuff that we're doing with our communication. Okay, that's it for my communication rant. I hope you guys have a great day, and let me know if you have any questions. I would love to put up more videos specifically dealing with communication things. I have a thing in the description. This workshop that I offer, it's a week-long workshop, and then there's also a weekend workshop that works on just teaching parents specifically how to teach communication to their kids, because it's so important. I literally cannot overstate how important communication is. And there's this great curriculum called Essential for Living, which is like a functional curriculum for moderately to severely disabled clients, which we know a lot of the time comes with huge communication deficits. And they started something called the Speaker Initiative, which basically is clinicians getting together and like vouching, saying, I'm going to help kids become speakers and function as speakers in their world, not just as listeners, not just as people who can follow directions and can do what they're asked and can listen and can respond to questions and all those things, but function as speakers, truly spontaneously be able to act on their motivation in a way that's going to get them what they need and want from their environment and from the people in their environment. So I really hope that you'll look it up. If you are a clinician who's interested in this, feel free to contact me. I do offer free consultations with my services. So anything that you want to talk about, of course, you can write in the comments or whatever. I'd be happy to hear from you. Bye.